Welcome to episode 52 of the FoodGrads Podcast, the podcast where we explore careers in the food, beverage, and agricultural industries. I'm your host, Veronica Hislop, a molecular science graduate student and career partner with FoodGrads. This week on the podcast, I interviewed Laurie Nicol, CareersNow Meat and Poultry Sector Lead. CareersNow is Food and Beverage Ontario's workforce development initiative for Ontario's vibrant and growing food and beverage manufacturing industry. On this episode, Laurie and I talked about the CareersNow initiative and how they are helping raise awareness for the industry, but also all the free resources available for you, the listener, that you can get through their program. So if you're interested to know more about that, we will be covering that much more in depth in the episode. When it comes to Laurie, though, she talked to me more about her career journey and how she got into the meat industry because it was never something that she was kind of planning on doing. And one of the things that she talked about was why she actually decided to stay in it. And it's not surprising that it involves the people. Honestly, I got a better understanding of how the meat industry works across Ontario. And honestly, I was surprised to learn how large it was and just the diversity among it in terms of the types of meat things. So maybe the size of the factories, the meat houses, just it's kind of overwhelming how big it is, and it's understandable why it's one of Ontario's biggest food and processing industries. That led us to talking about just general views of the industry as a whole, including the idea of craftsmanship and just where the industry stands on that, and just doing what you love to do. Laurie really knows what she is talking about, which is very evident because of her long-standing career within the industry. And who knows, maybe in this episode, you might just reconsider what you think about the industry. So, enough with that introduction. Let's get on with the show. Excellent. Okay, cool. So, thank you so much, Laurie, for taking the time to come on the show. I'm excited to share this conversation as you and I are both part of the CareersNow team, which is working for the Taste Your Future initiative, which is helping to promote the food and beverage industry to Ontarians and try to promote and get more students interested in it. So I'm happy to have this conversation with you.
Thanks so much, Veronica, and I'm thrilled to be here. As you mentioned, I'm part of the CareersNow team, and I'm leading the meat and poultry engagement strategy. Meat and Poultry Ontario works closely with Food and Beverage Ontario because, let's face it, the meat and poultry industry is almost 20% of Ontario's food and beverage manufacturing sector. So it's a very significant piece. So I'm happy to have a chat with you today.
Mm-hmm. It's so exciting that CareersNow is really taking off this year in terms of the additional resources that are available for students, but not even just students, just job seekers in general. I know that they're putting out the job seekers training, which is really great, where it's this like initiative of where people can sign up and there's all these different skills, like from HACCP to like how to get into the organization, like what is the food and beverage industry. It's just like crazy the amount of initiatives and free resources that they're giving for anyone who's interested in checking it out.
And it's so balanced that we're at the same time that we're helping job seekers, we're also helping the employers. And so you mentioned the job skills or job seekers training. There's also free training resources available for new hires. So once you get that person on board, and the courses are excellent and they're in smaller bite-sized modules. So it's not like, you're putting somebody through a 2-week sit in the classroom. They're more manageable, and they've been developed, let's face it, with industry input. So everything that these courses have been offered through Food Processing Skills Canada, they do a great job of ensuring that the content is very relevant to the audience.
And for someone who, like myself, what I really like about it is that you don't have to have any experience working in the food and beverage industry. For example, when I was graduating, I was coming out with a chemistry degree and I knew I kind of wanted to go into the food industry. So like, had I had that resource available, like someone can do right now, like it could really propel forward and like really get you started in the career that you want to do.
That's funny because it actually leads to the story of how I entered into the into the meat industry. I was a graduate from a business degree in a data processing major, was where I was headed. I had a strong interest in accounting, but didn't pursue that, but always the business end of it. When I graduated, I got hired immediately by the founder of what was then Ontario Independent Meat Processors Association, who owned an abattoir. And he was looking to revolutionize how custom cutting records were kept for farmers that were selling their livestock. You can appreciate, I want my side of beef cut into 3-pound roasts, and I want ground beef in 1-pound packages. So very personalized, very paper based. And when they would phone up a year later, when they asked for their side of beef, they'd say, cut it the same way as you did it last year. You can imagine how many records are. So I started my career as designing a database in a Commodore 64 for the founding president of the association that led me down the path of learning. I did not come from a farming background or a meat background. I was very business. I've only had one job my entire career, and that was working with the association, where I started in the data processing, learned the industry, and have had a very successful, it's now 35 years in this industry.
Wow. Congratulations on that. That's, I guess, it is a true attest to this industry and why you love to be in it.
And it's the people. We can talk about the industry as a whole, but generally speaking, it is those relationships that you build and you maintain for over a span of your lifetime. And it's also the diversity, right? Like I started as to do one task of designing a database. And then through my career as executive director of the association, involved in event planning, in government relations, in marketing, in communications. It's just, there's so many different opportunities of where one path might take you. It branches off into so many other streams.
Let's take a step back and go more into Meat and Poultry Ontario. You've been there for a very long time. Could you give me more of an explanation of what this association does? And maybe this can segue into talking about what the whole meat and poultry industry just looks like in Ontario.
Sure. So the meat and poultry industry in Ontario is a very diverse sector. And recognizing how large our province is, there's over 700 companies all across the province involved in various aspects of meat and poultry processing, from the very front end of harvesting right through further processing, all different sizes of businesses, from your large corporations to your family run 10-person operation. So thousands down to 10. Back in 1980, the association was started as a voice for those independent companies. Not only, I don't want to say that an advocacy part in terms of government, but we really embraced the need for food safety regulations. But we were part of how do we provide training and education to bring a sector along where they've been doing longstanding traditions. Things changed. You mentioned HACCP earlier. Food safety changed. We've seen the outbreaks, the allergens, and with that takes education. It's not something that the way we did things years ago, drove around in a car without a seatbelt. We don't do that today, right? So
Right.
The association got involved, and then certainly project, you mentioned Taste Your Future and CareersNow. It's really about helping the industry. Many of the companies they're so busy getting production out the door that anything that an association can do to help them in their business management tool. Certainly, we're talking today about the challenges of developing a workforce, and certainly with the labor shortages, this project is helping to bring those together. And also, I would say this has been a wonderful opportunity to highlight and maybe demystify what the industry is, because I know that Food Processing Skills Canada has done a lot of outreach and surveys. And if you asked, in particular, the younger generation, If you think of the meat industry, you just think of the place where the animals are first harvested. And that's only one part of the whole exciting sector that we represent.
One of the things that also came to mind is just in general, what type of meat are there? Poultry is pretty
Oh,
easy. I know Ontario is big for turkey and of course like chicken, but like when it comes to meat, what
but
is
it's
that?
but it's interesting when you say that because poultry. So we often just go to the turkey and chicken, but within the chicken sector itself, there's such diversity of your larger capons, your Cornish hens, your quail, duck, specialty birds.
Mm.
When you go to the what we're going to call is the red meat sector, automatically you think of beef and pork and lamb. I think we're one of the leading industry or the leading provinces in terms of goat production and manufacturing. We're doing buffalo. We now have farm raised buffalo. We have ostrich, rhea, rabbits, you name like it's a
Okay.
diverse, it's such a huge industry.
I had no idea. How come I don't know this? Like I pay attention
Ah,
to Ontario, to Ontario Maine, but yet for some reason I didn't know any of this.
yes. So, and I think that's we have companies that are just very specialized with pork only. But when you get into your smaller, and I should differentiate between urban and rural. So, if you go out into the rural countryside, you'll see more of that diversity, the relationships with their local livestock producers. And they might be doing everything from beef and pork and lamb and goat. Some facilities even have also, again, we're calling it the white meat, but they'll have poultry processing at two separate facilities on the same property.
Oh, okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah. And the things that they're making with these products, certainly the duck industry, you're seeing a lot more value added, the smoked duck breast in our mainstream grocery stores.
Well, I'm gonna
Mhm.
have to keep my eye out for this type of stuff because I didn't know. I know there was a big push campaign, at least I was made aware. I know turkey was really pushed in the past few years. I feel like that campaign really stood out to me. But in terms of these others, again, very shocked by it.
But I think we've grown up in a society where turkey is for Christmas and for Thanksgiving. And turkey is really such a versatile product that, so I do Christmas in July every year and I cook a turkey outside on the barbecue. I actually drive up to Dashwood to pick it up fresh to put it on the barbecue.
Mm.
But that is, again, we're not just buying a whole turkey anymore. We're buying where they've deboned the turkey and put seasoning on it. There's just so much variety available to today's consumer for almost every protein.
That makes sense. And I'm guessing that also extends to the actual processing facilities and such, because I think that a misconception, and maybe I'm right or maybe I'm wrong, is that a lot of the meat is processed at maybe the bigger name companies. And is this always the case?
No, and I think one of the most exciting. When I started with the association, they called it the cured meat competition, and it was typically your smoked ham, your Black Forest ham, and your bacon to what Meat and Poultry Ontario has as the Ontario Finest Meat Competition. And the quality of the products that you're seeing that are vying for championship standings, you're now seeing in the mainstream retail chains that and marketed as award-winning product of what they're doing with different of cuts of meat, of what they're doing with the flavorings. It's such an exciting time. And I'm sure you've seen the whole escalation of the charcuterie board. And that is some of the finest cured and smoked products are coming out of the small companies. And when you talk about the jobs that are available in those, it's like, how great is it to say that you work for a company that has, you can walk into some of these facilities and see the wall of award-winning plaques that they've received for in recognition of the products that they've been making.
No, it's so great that you mentioned that because I think that's something that we need to see a little bit more here, at least in Canada. And of course, there's all these celebrations of food and such, but I think that if we can even better promote how unique Canadian offerings are, because I think that a lot of people associate maybe with European products, these fine made cheeses or meats. A lot of people associate it with the European countries, but if they just look over here in Ontario and across Canada, there's so many locally made high quality products, and it needs some more time to shine. And
It's amazing. And, I don't think because we're in the sector, we look at it, but not many people pick up their product packaging and look to see where it's made, right? And I have the joy of when I drive across the province and see all these meat shops and know that the networking that they do amongst them, not everyone is involved in the curing and smoking side of it, but if they've got a retail counter in there, they have those relationships with one another and they carry each other's products. So, because today's consumer wants to go in there and have everything in front of them.
That's for sure. And in terms of with this idea, so it sounds as though in terms of the industry, there's a wide range of things where it's someone, if they wanted to go into the sector, it's not just working for maybe the larger processors, but there's also maybe opportunities for the smaller, more specialty, the years aged, smoked, and all that type of stuff. Is that correct?
It is. And even within a large, I'd say for both sides of the companies, there's always obviously a larger company, perhaps more opportunities, but within a smaller company, I think one of the selling points is that variety. So if you go to a large company, you might be doing that one job all the time. You go to a smaller company, you have that access to multiple different types of jobs, if that's your thing. But I think a lot of students think of it as just, you know what, I just don't want to just cut meat. Okay, so that's only one job. How about being the sausage maker? And when we're talking about very sophisticated equipment, most of it has been imported from European countries. But the packaging part of it, the food safety side to it, the graduates coming out of, I live in Guelph, so University of Guelph food science program, the quality assurance technicians, the HACCP coordinator, you look at the auditing component of it, a job for the provincial government or federal government working as a meat inspector. One of the benefits in both a small and large company, look at the research and development, the product development, right? Let's just even take sausages. So a sausage used to be cutting edge if it was blended with beef and pork and some different seasonings in there. We're now seeing it with feta cheese and different smoke flavors. I think of bacon. Bacon traditionally was only, a pork base. We have beef bacon, we have turkey bacon, we have chicken bacon. That all comes out of product development. Even skilled trades within the organizations, depending on the size, they might have an in-house mill or electrician or a plumber. There's all kinds of refrigeration required in a meat and poultry processing facility. Those are more on I'm going to say the harder skills, but every company has a business component to it. Depending on the size of the company, within the larger ones, you'll have that finance manager and an HR manager and the plant controller, sales and marketing. There's lots of fun jobs. And I look at some of the great marketing that companies are doing using the social media channels, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, communication jobs within the organization. But look at all the not-for-profit organizations that exist in Ontario, and all of them usually have a communications component. So when we look at it, I think we need to look at it as an industry and like in a plant, but also the side jobs that support the industry. Those are also available, like a food writer. And then I've been focusing in on the processing side of it, but all the retail and food service and the suppliers to the industry, like it's a significant sector to Ontario's economy.
Oh, for sure. And I I'll share a personal opinion. I always find it quite strange when they're talking about in the news about the auto industry or all these other industries. And I'm pressed to hear a lot of the times talking with the food industry when it's such a big part of our economy. It supports so many Canadians. We eat local and all that. And I find it odd when the sector has so many roles that are open for all walks, like you were talking
Mhm.
about, like all types of walk. You could really find anything that you can put
Mhm.
your mind to. And it's just, that's why, as someone, sometimes people ask me, what are you going to do when you graduate? And I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to stick to the food industry because I know that there's a good purpose. There's jobs that are out there, and there's a lot of different options in terms of where to live, what type
Yeah.
of facility, and all these things.
And let's face it, we're always going to need to eat.
That is true. The pandemic definitely showed that when the whole world was shut down, which industry was chugging along? That was the
Mhm.
food industry.
And that our sector had to pivot. If you look at markets shifted like overnight, basically. So as soon as the restaurant trade was closed down, a lot of our processors were supplying that chain. So now they're trying to put more product out into the retail space, and more people were cooking at home and spending more on higher cuts, whereas you might not have done that in the past because you saved your budget for eating out. So it's been an interesting, challenging, but also opportunities. But and when we talk about the labor problem, it existed prior to COVID, and we're not the only sector that is challenged with trying to find people. But I think if students knew about what those opportunities are, it opens the door. It's options.
Let's talk about that now because this podcast is mainly our audience is focused on students. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about in particular is just the general environment working in. I know that we talked about the distinction of many of them, but just in general, like working in a meat facility, because I know that a lot of people see it as these very cold, dark places where people cut on a line and that is the job. Like, is that
Well,
actually how it is?
that is one job. But as I said, you could be in the packaging room where it's not. I could compare it to in a bakery. Your temperatures are going to be higher, your smells are going to be different. There's no doubt there's an environmental component to working in food processing. Somebody might find fermentation of brewing to be an obnoxious smell. Physical labor, if that's not for you, then maybe that's you're not in the packaging line where you have to lift boxes. It's finding, you need to find out about the jobs. And I think we're doing a better job about showcasing. Unfortunately, some of them do start off that advertising thing, must be able to lift 50 pounds. So maybe instead of paying for a gym membership, you get your physical activity within a meat and poultry processing facility. You don't have to pay a gym membership.
That is true. I did hear about some coworkers one time. It wasn't a meat and industry, but they were lifting a lot of boxes, and they're like, "Yeah, I don't need to go to the gym no more."
No.
So,
And you know what? And so if it's a cold environment, you dress appropriately. They've come a long way in insulated jackets. It's a cold environment for the purpose of protecting the integrity of the food. You could, in different countries, you can cut meat out in the sweltering temperatures, but that's not how our first and foremost is to ensure that we're providing a safe, wholesome product to the consumer. So the environment is not cold to keep you awake. It's there to protect the safety of the product.
that's
But
a good point.
there's office jobs, there's lab jobs. So it really is where you see yourself fitting into those type of organizations.
That's true. Well, let's talk more about, we've kind of talked, okay, well, the environment is cold and unfortunately, it is there for food safety sake, and it's to keep everyone again safe. But you had mentioned, let's go on to a more of a high note because you had mentioned that one of the good things about working in this industry is of the people. And could you talk a little bit more about what do you mean by the people are good? Let's just talk about your
So,
personal experiences.
and I've had many. There's one family that I always talk about. I've 3 generations had the opportunity through the span of my career to deal with. And it is about whether they're a large or small company, they're all trying to do a good job of showing that, they're nothing without their team. And we need to show more and more. And they're doing a nice job of showing that they're valued, appreciated. I recently saw one LinkedIn posting, and I know that they've been doing it for a very long time. Every Friday before a long weekend, they have a staff luncheon and provide lunch for their workforce. The other thing that they're doing, employee discounts. But I thought I would share with you, through the last project I worked on, we did a worker survey. And I thought, who better? I can tell you what it is, but this is coming from the front line people, the comments that what they like about where they work. Serving the public, leading my teammates. It's all about the people. My coworkers are so supportive. There's a teamwork environment. My boss makes me feel like a team. I feel we're treated as equal. Independency within the role, the opportunities to grow and advance my career. Good variety of tasks, independent role, combination of mental and physical work, constant changes, makes me busy all the time. The challenge I gain experience, learning new things, teaching new hires, hours and schedule flexibility, being left alone because I know what I'm doing, always a new project to work on and skills to learn. And it gives me the chance to earn money to support my family. And the owners make an effort to understand and support their employees. And I think the best one is helping to provide people with safe, delicious food. You got to love what you do. We don't stay where we are. We need money to support our families. But at the end of the day, how many hours we spend away from home in our careers, you need to like what you're doing and the people you're working with.
That is for sure. Wow. Sorry again, these were responses that were surveyed?
Yeah, we conducted both an employer and an employee. So those are quotes from people that are working within the companies.
Oh, that is really nice to hear, because I think these are some of the things that are really hard to articulate to maybe the public or knowing about where to work. It's a little more difficult, well, not difficult, but when a lot of individuals who go to work, they're not blasting it on social media, but they don't really share their content for it. So sometimes that can get hidden. And I know a lot of these companies, especially family companies, for example, like they really do these luncheons, and these aren't things that people are just going to blast on social media, but they do make good workplaces.
They do. And, unfortunately, COVID, it stopped even bringing in a box of donuts, which was a regular, because no one could have all their hands in you could wrap them up individually. Those are the kind of things that there's lots of examples of other things that companies are doing that one of the workers mentioned about the flexible schedule flexibility. More and more working moms are in the workforce, and that might mean a delayed start, leaving at different times. The work ethic today is much different than it was 30 years ago, right? We need to be listening. And I do believe that a good company is listening to their most valuable asset, which is their teammates, their employees.
And I think it's really important that you are also pointing that out in terms of flexibility for roles that are not desktops, because I know that a lot of people who are looking for flexibility are assuming that it can only be for, hybrid work, in terms of, you're doing even something like R&D, maybe you work on home at Fridays. Unfortunately, physically present jobs, you can't have that, but companies are recognizing that they need flexibility as well, in terms of there's life outside of work, and sometimes those priorities take priority.
And I think we've all learned that it's going to take a while, but we do need to figure out that work-life balance, because we have to fill these positions, and automation is not a solution. It's a tool, but it's not a solution. We will always still require labor in our sector, and some really fun, exciting jobs.
Maybe this is just, you might not have the answer for this, but for some people who are looking for particular roles and they're looking for, maybe they might want to work for a company, but they're not quite sure about something that wouldn't work for them. Let's just say maybe a start time, or I'm just trying to think of examples that might prevent them from adhering to the job posting. Do you think these are types of things that people should bring up in their interview? Or I guess I'm trying to say, like, how do you address this flexibility?
Well, and you know what? I think that we are now in a era that we have to throw that out as a job seeker. If that is, you know, you got to be honest with them. I know that posting was 6 a.m., 3 stop. Is there any flexibility? I think one of the things, so I've been participating in a CareersNow virtual job fair. COVID actually made it more that you could have those conversations virtually. And more companies are doing like a virtual plant tour so that they have an idea of what that environment is like before they go in. But it always starts with a conversation, and not to be afraid to ask. Some, it might not work. If you're a 10-person operation and those are the hours, that might not work for you.
But I guess it is like, there is room to ask, because I guess one of the things that was coming up in my mind, because I remember hearing about one of the companies, like one of the difficulties with one of the places I personally worked was the late shift. I know at the facility I was at, they didn't have any options for like busing, for example, at 2 in the morning when I was coming out. But I know that some companies actually do offer like actual shuttle bus services to work.
So we've had to be very creative in, if you look at some of the facilities that are in rural that doesn't even have, that there is no access to public transportation. There are employers that will drive into the city and with their the company van, and pick up a shift of employees. There's also companies that are doing more to try to match the ride sharing opportunities with employees. We've all had to become creative and because relocation isn't, where every sector is faced with the challenge of recruiting and affordable living. That's not something that we're going to be able to address. And depending on, where that job is located, and recognize that these are all across the province. So there's no one that's the same, right?
Right. Well, it's really, of course, yeah, every business is, and I guess at the end of the day, it doesn't hurt to ask. At the end of the day, just a job interview and those types of things are a mutual agreement, or a mutual kind of interview, so to say, to see if an employer would work for you and if you would work for the employer. It's one of those types of things. And there's a lot of options. If one company doesn't work for you, there's a lot of great companies that are across the country, or across Ontario, in terms of maybe if you want to go for something that's more of a rural place, or maybe if you want to go for suburban, but there's a place all like scattered. You just have to look for them.
Yeah, exactly. And we need to do, I think there's a lot of frustration out there right now. So they're not always doing the best job of telling the story, unfortunately, because there is a story to be told. And I look at some of the plants that I've seen over the years, some of the processing facilities that, are located in rural, in a lovely community. And if that's for you, you know what, that would be, how do you tell that story?
Exactly. And sometimes maybe even just through things like podcasts like this, maybe somebody's going to be listening and they're going to go, oh, I never thought to actually ask about something like that. And it's through opening these conversations. And let's do it one more time. I know that I might have already asked you this, but was there any stories in particular that maybe you wanted to highlight in the meat industry, something that's happened to you that just really shows the essence of what it's like?
People are so caring, right? Like my son grew up in this industry. He'll be 25 next month. And people I met when I was pregnant with him still ask today, how was your son? It's just that kind of, the community that you've met across the companies, the different organizations. It really is. It goes to the community. And I think that's one thing that at the Association Meat and Poultry in Ontario that's been around for 40 years, that's what I was drawn to. And that's what keeps that group together, is that whole sense of community and caring. Because at the end of the day, we all need people, and job seekers can choose where they go. But when you treat people well and you provide that kind of environment to work in that you enjoy going to, they stay.
Hmm. That's for sure. And just the Meat and Poultry Ontario, now that I think about it, because one of the things that I've always liked is whenever I've gone to like events, for example, like the CIFST, the Canadian Institute of Food Science and Technology conference, or if I went to the Women in Food Industry Management, like you show up and everyone's like, how are you doing? Like you see everyone. It's like some like everyone's everywhere. And I was wondering, does the Meat and Poultry Ontario have any resources or events that like students can participate in or attend just to get a feel of the industry?
Yeah. So every 2 years, now COVID got them off schedule, but Meat and Poultry holds an expo. Forgive me, it's October, I think 14th, 15th this year. It's a trade show that shows equipment suppliers, different technology. Will Obviously, there's other people there, but
Mhm.
they'll also be hosting the butcher competition. And I know that Amy brought down her classes to not only see, it's great to see the variety of equipment that is out there. Like if you think of, it's not just knives, right? These large,
Yes.
these large processing pieces of equipment, and the sanitation, microbiology, packaging, you name it. So
Mhm.
it's suppliers to the industry that are there. And they do hold the final for the butcher competition on the Saturday, which led to very exciting that for the first time, Canada will be putting in a Team Canada into the World Butcher Competition in September of this year. And 4 of the 7 teammates came from Ontario through that butcher competition.
Whoa, that's like really cool. So I did look it up. So it is October 14th to the 15th, and it's in Niagara Falls. But that's really cool. I think again, coming back to, being able to celebrate it. And like I think this would be, it sounds like it'd be a great opportunity for students to, walk the shop, like really get a good grasp of like
Mhm.
what it would be like. Cause I think that going to expos, I think that, students might not think about, oh, it's an expo, it's for selling things and that, but it's a really fun time. And
Well,
just
it
like,
is. And that's that again. How do we market it to those in the industry, but we're not thinking of it from the job attraction. And
mhm,
we need to do more. And it doesn't it you're working with graduate students. We've got to get back into primary school, right? Or secondary school. Like we need to start talking about this early on. And I know that Egg in the Classroom was a start, and we are working on a project with Eggscape to get curriculum for the meat and poultry processing sector, because we do need to start talking about there is a career paths available.
for sure. And I know that the industry is looking for everyone. And I do think maybe it does come down to education, because maybe I'm just like blanking it out, but I don't remember learning much about the food industry, to be honest, when I was growing up. And
No,
I kind of learned it myself from watching the Food Network, which hooray, how much I love it. But
yes.
time comes to school, I would have loved, and coming even high school, I wanted to take a cooking class, but because I
Mhm.
was bound for university, guess what? You don't get to take it because it doesn't match a credential, which I think is insane.
No, and that's where we're having a lot of fun working with Escape on and their researchers on making, so education needs to be fun and educational. And so when you think of teaching, there's just so many scenarios and activities that lead you down a path that you could see yourself in different roles. And if it is just not just, but a general labor position is all you want, or you could be the meat inspector that is in the facility, or the head of sanitation.
And I think that's a fun thing to also point out as well in terms of jobs. I think there's nothing, if someone wants to progress in their career in terms of just taking on different roles and becoming a meat inspector, becoming a QA manager, like taking these more senior positions, that's great. For many individuals, they want to just go in, they do their general labor position, and they'll do it for 20, 30 years. And if that's what they enjoy, that should be perfectly fine as well. As it's just the work environment is so crucial for that.
And it's a stable, reliable income.
It's very true. The food industry is a very stable environment, unlike, the tech sector or that, like, we're going to be eating in 20 years. Like, there's no doubt about it. And especially Canada becoming, even more of a, what's the word? With Canada becoming even more of a leader in that, hopefully, as time goes on. So,
I love about LinkedIn, and you're seeing more companies celebrate promotions. And, I think to the testament is when individuals are talking about their experience, right? Like, I started in the office doing this, and now I'm HR manager, right? And if you also, employers will look to their employees is like, you know what, you might have taken this job, but you're really good at doing that. Have you considered it? Would you be interested?
I think that's a really good thing to point out because, for example, I know it's not in the meat industry, but I do know that companies like Gailey Foods, I know one person who they started as a general labor position and now that they're the head of supply chain and that was over the course of maybe 8 years. And that's just because a lot of companies also offer inbound like training and all that. And a lot of times they would rather much hire within and promote rather than hire outside.
And that's the other is the summer internship opportunities. That's a great segue into getting into a company and see if you like working there. And often there's lots of students I've talked to lots of employers that hire the same student back and they get that experience, whether they decide that they want a career at the end, maybe not, but their stable summer employment through their post-secondary education.
That's another good point too, because a lot of food facilities, a lot of employees take their vacations in the summertime. So there tends to be a little bit less staff. So they like to hire more students to supplement it. And it's a great way to just get your hands in there and
see if that's what you like.
Exactly. And if you don't like it, it's another great industry where even if you work in general labor and then maybe you want to do QA when you graduate, that will directly help you. It definitely will.
Yes.
Laurie, I think that this has been a really nice conversation. And I think that I want to end it there because, we've talked so much about the scope of the overall industry. We've talked about meat and poultry Ontario, and I've also learned a lot more about my own province that I didn't even know more about.
Well, and Veronica, we should connect and see how we might be able to promote to get some students down to the expo, because I think it's a great opportunity, and specifically to watch the butcher competition is always fun.
For sure. So thank you so much, Laurie, for taking the time to come on the show. And I hope that everyone got out of this as much as I did. And I'll make sure to share in the show notes all the amazing resources that we talked about, like the Taste Your Future with their initiative with the skills training. Let's see if we can get some more information on the expo, but also just bringing more awareness to this industry, because I think that, like you said, it makes up, I think, 20% of Ontario's
food and beverage industry.
Exactly. And that's already a large number when that's the largest manufacturing in Ontario.
Yes.
So thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks so much. Bye now.